Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Leading Together. Today, we're joined with State Representative Mike Smith, who served in Delaware's 22nd District, covering Pike Creek Valley and parts of Hockessin and Newcastle. He's been in office since 2018, and in the General Assembly, he sits on key committees that touch nearly every part of issues that we care about, including education, economic development, health, and labor. But outside the legislature, Mike is deeply involved in his community, and I'm really happy that he's going to be here with us today. He was just before the show, we were talking about how he bumps into everyone in the community, and they have all of these questions. So I think he does do the work when he's in Dover, but he's also doing the work when he's here at home. But he serves on boards, he coaches youth sports, he volunteers at his church, and he also works as the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships with the University of Delaware's College of Health and Sciences. So he and his wife, Christy, have 3 boys, and he's really been one of the leading voices responding to the current conversation around the statewide property reassessments. So today we're going to talk about what's changing, why it matters for taxpayers and for schools, and to hear what he's hearing from the people that he represents. So again, I'm Julia Kelleher with the Executive Director of First Aid Educate. Mike, thank you so much for being here today. I'm super curious to hear your thoughts and perspectives around everything that's changed. So, it's been decades, right?
Yes,
and here we are.
It has. I think the last time reassessment in Newcastle County happened, I was not born yet. So
really,
yes, that's how long it's been.
Wow. That's a long time. So what does it mean to do it? Like, let's start with that, because everyone's talking about it, but people may have different understandings of what exactly a property reassessment means. What happened?
Yeah, so I think the last time it happened in Newcastle County, if I'm not mistaken, was around 1983. And that was the last time properties were assessed of what their value was. And so what that does is there was a lawsuit by the ACLU that basically said, hey, how we're funding our schools is not equitable. And so what reassessment does, it doesn't change the pool of money, the amount, it just changes how it's spread around more than anything. I think one thing people should understand is the only way to really get more money into the tax base is either new homes, right, or new companies, new businesses that are being assessed. We can talk about the commercial versus non-commercial side too, because that's been a hot topic. So what that is basically being reassessed on what the value of your actual home is on net present value, and then paying taxes according to that assessment.
So to give a concrete example, and the reason why this matters to an organization like First Aid Educated is because it is these local property taxes that are going to go into funding schools and the boards will be making decisions over.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's hard in this whole thing is, as you know, that Delaware has 19 school districts. I think it's like 24 charters maybe. And so, how we fund is wildly different. Now, all 3 counties had to go through the reassessment process. While that's important, there was one house I know of down in Sussex County, for instance, they were paying less than $100 a year in property taxes from their last evaluation. Now, what has happened since 1978? The homes have skyrocketed in Sussex County at the beaches. The price of those homes are way more expensive. So that brings it up to the value of what it should be, meaning you're paying taxes on the value of what it should be, not the value of what it used to be.
Wow, that's a stark example. So if my home cost $150,000 when I bought it right before you were born, and now all of a sudden I'm paying, and there was a rate that everyone paid. I don't know offhand if those rates are the same or different.
No, they changed the rate. Yeah.
So if it was 10%, my house was $150,000. I'm paying 15, right? 15.
So so what we're finding was, right, there was a lot of people that, let's just say their house was $100,000 or $200,000, let's say on the higher end, and now you have people that are getting evaluations of $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000. I think the biggest thing to explain to people is for some people it all hit rapidly at the same time. So I think we can both agree that a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to school board votes and referendum votes.
That's a problem. It's a problem. Yes,
they don't come out. as frequently as they should. And I think that in my area, especially, that's what happened. And we can talk about several of the areas. In my area, I represent mostly red clay. And so
Mhm,
red clay, what they did, which I think they did the right thing, they held a referendum. It was last
mhm,
year. It was for operating and for capital. Okay. So it's
mhm,
phased in over a 3-year period. And so we're in year 2 of that phase in. Year 1 was 50%, year 2 is 25%, year 3 is
mhm.
25%. The problem is people saw the reassessment and they're seeing that at the same time, and they
I
equal it
know.
out to the
Mhm.
same thing because
Right.
county acts as a conduit, as a middleman between
Mhm,
the school districts and the
mhm,
taxpayer by collecting that. And so
mhm,
a lot of people are seeing some of their evaluations, they're seeing actually they're doing better because of the new rate, right? Where most
mm,
of the tax they're seeing is actually coming on the school district side of things. And a
mm,
lot of people don't understand why that is. A lot of people don't understand the referendum process. I think the engagement side of a referendum process is always off too. I mean, one thing you probably see as well is we just don't have the local media that we used to. Like the news journal
mhm.
used to be more
Yeah.
local media, now it's not. And so just people aren't, well, people are getting their media from so many different sources now. They don't get the most local things. And
Right.
if you don't have an active representative, you probably don't be. I try to be the local news for my
Mhm,
constituents, at least
mhm.
educating them on how to get involved in a process.
Yep.
And so that's what people are seeing. Where in Christina, for instance, they didn't go to referendum last year. Instead, there's a law in the books that says after every reassessment, you can tax up to an additional 10%
Mhm,
on top of that reassessment rate. And now, I do think a lot of people are questioning 10% of what? The
mhm,
previous, the current, the uh,
mm,
the 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 net present value, the
mhm.
difference. That's I think some of the questions everybody wants to ask uh, when we go back into special session. And I know Newcastle County is grappling with that as well.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you on a couple points there that you made, that are very important to us. The turnout this year, the voter, it was around 16,000 that voted in the school board elections, and I think
That's total in all school board elections.
so in the whole state. Yeah. But
Wow.
the year before it was only 5. So, we feel like we're doing better trying to get the message out there. First Aid Educate had a lot of visibility partners last year. So they were businesses and nonprofits that also pushed not absolutely nothing to do with who to vote for, but that there's a vote and that you need to know who's running. And I think in retrospect, it seems very important now that that decision that was just made in May has a lot to do with the decisions that are going to be made around these funds and how, right? Like, so
Yeah.
we kind of just put people in seats that are responsible for these decisions that have created such a stir. But I also think you made an excellent point about communication. And I appreciate you being here today just so that First Aid Educate can try to push the information out. Um, there's not a lot of awareness around what's going on. And I think it's something that I know Spotlight Delaware is trying to focus more attention on it. I agree with you about, the what the news journal is doing, but we need more. We need more people engaged in more accessible communication around what are the issues people need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have 3 kids. Okay, so I kind of get it. I'm like bought into how education is in our state. I live it
Mhm.
every day. My wife's a teacher. Her mom's a teacher. Her mom, who's since passed, is a teacher. I get all
Wow.
that. We have a lot of friends that are teachers. Me personally, though, everybody has a different opinion on it. My job isn't to necessarily tell you how to think or how to feel. It's to help you where to navigate your questions, where to get
Yeah.
answers, and how to be a part of the process. Like I get a lot of some of the feedback I've gotten are from, older adults who never had kids who are
Mhm.
70 plus and they're paying these high school district taxes. They don't like the
Yeah.
direction of our schools sometimes, so they have one opinion, or they don't even have
Mhm.
an opinion on the direction of our schools. They're saying, I never even have kids, and why am I paying this? And
Mhm. Mhm.
X, Y, or Z. Or, you get a lot of folks nowadays are like, why they look at it as a return on investment. Why are we spending this much money with, a little return on our literacy
Mhm.
or our math
Mhm.
scores or whatever,
Mhm.
maybe our NAEP scores, those types of things. So I think there's a lot of people out there, and I've been trying to tell them. I have 2 constituent coffee meetings every month at a minimum. I
Mhm.
take the summer off. generally for a month and a half, just to let people enjoy their summer. But this summer, everybody's getting hit with the bills and what's
Right, right.
to them, like, you need to start getting involved in your school board elections,
Exactly.
referendums. I mean, at the end of the day, I look at school boards, the county, and the state as a partnership. We need to have a better partnership, and we don't sometimes. Um, but whatever the county votes on, that's going. A lot of people are going to come to me as their representative for an answer,
Sure.
not knowing what pocket of government is doing that. But also, not a lot of people realize like how much power school board members have and
Oh,
the
yeah.
policy that's being dictated. So, I always say when it comes to education, our state, their elections are way more important than the state level elections in some
Yeah.
cases. You have to pay attention.
Yeah, I think it's just great that you want to see a partnership there. That is something we're trying to promote. We had our Vision and Voices event where we tried to bring, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of education, elected officials, and then the newly elected state, and then the newly elected school board members to get behind one vision, right? I mean, if there's a plan for the state, we've got to be working together. We can't all be playing from a different sheet of music and with one hand not knowing what the other's doing. And that's not, to your point earlier, I think no one's trying to dictate to any other actor what they're supposed to do, right? But it's kind of, this is a collective
Yeah.
societal benefit. We're in it for the good of Delaware and the quality of life here and economic prosperity, right? Like we all want those things.
Yeah. I mean,
But
at the end of the day, to me, if you want to simplify it, like you have to think about how do we pay for our schools? I think that's the larger discussion that is getting lost here. How do we pay for our schools? How do we pay for the services that students need in our schools? How do we make sure teachers are being paid accordingly in a competitive environment with our surrounding states, with the added benefit of being state employees? How are we doing those things? And again, what are the outputs that are coming out? How are our children getting a world-class quality education now to prepare them, whether it's for college or the workforce, whatever it may be? That's really the question. It's almost, to me, it's like a back to the basics mentality. How do we get back there? At the end of the day, we want productive citizens that come out of our schools.
right.
That's really it. And so that's what I'm really focused on.
I wonder though, it's a great question. It's probably different in every place, but like what does it cost to educate a child in Delaware, right? Like what some of these school district budgets, I'm not sure that people are aware that they're in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like these are
It's some
enormous
of the
sums of
largest
money.
contracts we have. I mean, just in the I'm on the bond bill, the capital improvement committee, and just in deferred maintenance alone, our school districts asked for over, I think, $270 million. Right? I
Wow.
mean, that's just deferred maintenance.
Right.
And if you look at the United States Census Bureau, so I think everybody can agree that's what people look at when it comes to data.
Yeah.
In the biggest capacity, Delaware was listed as a southern state instead of a northeast state, which I find to be odd. But Delaware, they were the second highest for average per pupil spending at $21,340 per student.
Really? Interesting.
Washington D.C. was 31,629 above them, and a bunch of our surrounding states are either a little less or a little more than us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what's going in and what we're getting on the other side, and what's how do we know? To me, one question that always comes up every year is like, okay, this is what we tried. We bought, package X that we thought was going to help this subgroup of students because the research said. Then I think if I were making that decision, I would look and say, did it? Am I seeing an impact? Did it work? Is there an improvement, right? Or should I buy it again? Should I buy more of it? Should I buy less of it? Would more kids benefit, right? But I think there's got to be this kind of practical, common sense approach to how the resources are allocated against achieving a goal.
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, you constantly have to be looking if there's improvement or what, or you have to look at the data. Is it being supported? I've been on a million education subcommittees, like task forces. I was on the Reading Consortium for 4 years, and I did mainly teacher recruitment and retention with some of the programs that we're currently running now. But what the school district heard about teachers leaving, meaning are they going to a different district? Or are they leaving the profession altogether, going to a different state? The number one reason people were leaving was school leadership. So they just didn't feel like school leaders had their back. Number two was school safety, meaning they didn't feel safe with the students. The students could potentially hurt them. That was
Mhm.
number two. And then number three was school pay. So I think we dealt with one and three. I think we need to
Mhm.
really hone in on number two. I even had
Mhm.
a group of teachers the other day. I try to engage with folks on social media and other things. And I had a group of teachers come to me and meet with me. And one of the ideas they had was, like, we could keep people in the profession, and I could actually feel better about the abuse that I take if they gave me hazard pay. And I was like,
Hmm.
that is a super interesting
Yeah, I've
policy
never heard that.
proposal. I never even would have thought of something like
Thought of that. Right,
that.
right,
So maybe
right.
that's something we have to consider
Yeah.
as we move forward, as we look at the data. But to your point of looking at outcomes for students, that's how we have to look at
Mhm.
careers and what careers are going to be popular
Sure.
and what we need to educate towards. So it's not only the
Mhm.
programming in our schools, but it's if it's working. I mean, you know about opportunity funding, and we finally
Right.
codified that. But the way we dealt with that is almost like changing, if you're in the NFL, changing your offensive coordinator or your head coach every
Mhm.
year. It's like,
Mhm.
well, we did
Mhm.
it, but we don't know if we were successful or not, so we're just going to stop
Right.
and then try something new. And then how is it working? I think those are
Right.
all the questions. But when I look at all this property reassessment stuff, and the non-commercial versus commercial rates that
Yeah.
the school boards can't change, that we need to kind of codify differently in the state, all
Mhm.
these things, whether we should be able to allow school districts to tax up to 10% or not through
Mhm.
referendum or not referendum, all of it truly to me goes to, like, how are we paying for an education
Mhm.
that we are constitutionally obligated to give people? And to me, that needs to be
Mhm.
quality education. What are they
Yeah.
learning?
No.
And what are they going to college? Are they working? What are they doing? And
Mhm.
let's help them through that.
No, I agree. It's important because it's the it's the future. These are the future of 142,000 at least young people who are relying on public education system for what their quality of life will be and economic mobility and all and feeling fulfilled and finding something that's a sustaining career.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the so one thing I thought was another good point about the timing of these two things that they came together at the same time. There was a referendum increase and then there was also this property tax thing, but the unexpected piece I think was also the 10% hike that some of the districts were able to do because it is in law. And
Yep.
should that stay, should that go, do we think after reassessment, in your opinion, should it be an automatic, should everything go to referendum? Where do you kind
Sure.
of fall out on
I
that
think on the
continuum?
I think in our current system, it does have to go to referendum based off the current
Hmm.
system that we have. And a lot of people
Hmm.
would push back on that. But unless you're going to change structurally how we pay for things, that is the
Hmm.
system that we live within. So why
Hmm.
should school districts and school boards allow up to a 10% tax after reassessment? And the reason why I brought this bill up, gosh, it was 3 years ago now, was the first time I
Hmm.
brought it up, was, to me, I was looking at the future. Now, if you're going to say we have to do reassessment every 5 years, you're saying they can then do that every 5 years. So it's
Hmm.
more of a strategy of saying we don't, school districts like Christina can say, I don't want to go to referendum because it might fail. I'm just going to take it
Hmm.
over here because I
Hmm. Hmm.
and
hmm
so to me, it goes to, like, what are you spending it on? And to me, hey, that's where the partnership comes in. Like, people that are mad about it, I would say, why are you against data? I'm not
hmm
against spending money for programming for kids and making
Right.
sure there's the teachers and all these things, but why is it wrong to want transparency and accountability to make sure it is?
Sure.
Those aren't mutually exclusive things. So to me,
Mhm,
under the current model, I think, yeah, you should have to go to referendum and let people decide that. Because then if it fails, either way, we then have to deal with that on the state level and,
mhm.
decide if those are strategic investments to make in our budget. If you look at the state budget, education and healthcare are the two biggest expenses that
Biggest.
we have.
Right,
And so we
right.
have to, make those considerations. But yeah, under the current system, I think you should have to. And that's why I proposed that bill. If we're going to keep doing reassessment, then we kind of have to be ready to answer that question if school
Sure.
districts should be allowed to do that. My answer
Sure.
was no, and it's more for the reason you're doing now. I mean, Christina's a great example, and some of the others, like, you can take 10%, but originally you were blaming the feds, saying, well, the feds didn't give us our money, so we need to. Well, then they just
Mhm,
needed the money, so why do you then need it?
mhm,
You didn't tell us what
mhm,
you were going to
mhm,
use it for.
mhm. Yeah.
And so maybe it's a different auditing structure that goes with that. Speaking of which, like, I was glad those two Newcastle County Council people said they wanted to audit Tyler Technologies. I think that would be a great way to do it. Like, that was clearly a very good process, and they were paid a lot of money to do a very bad job. And they were, you come to find out too, Julia, they were the only company that actually bid across all the counties. They were the only company
Really?
that did. Yeah. So, that's broken within itself. Where's the competition to come in to see who can do a better job? Because at the end of the day, they actually have no authority. What the county then says it is, it is. It's not, the Tyler's pretty much giving them the recommendation, but we have, I've heard from a million people at this point that have said, hey, everyone in my neighborhood was assessed at this. Mine's $200,000 more than them, but I have less room, this and that.
Yeah.
So clearly, like, from an equitable perspective, they're not, they're doing it totally different. If you're going to do it, just do it off total square footage and move on. Like they're doing that. So
that speaks to, I mean, a couple things come up there for me. One is the transparency of the process of how it was done. I don't know if that information is out there, but I would think that there's some kind of like error analysis or sort of, quality control when you're doing this number of assessments, right? You've got to be able to take, okay, this is how it all turned out. Here's the output, and then go back and just sort of check to make sure, are they all squaring? And we are finding examples, at least anecdotally, where it's not matching up. One house is this and the other house is that. So I would have thought that would have been part of a contract to do this kind of work. You know what I mean? That there's some QA on the back end.
No,
I don't know.
There's even situations where, like, they don't even have the Tyler data or information to use for their meetings.
Oh, wow.
With the county. And like, so again, what would be the point of that then? What was the point of all of that if you then don't have a question and they didn't make the change? So
yeah, interesting. I want to go back to something else you said too about, like, and I get that your point about two different sets of rules. If the rule is that districts need to go to referendum to ask for a tax increase for capital, then that's the rule. If the rule is that after if they can, but only in this exception case where there are reassessments, I think you're saying those two, they're inconsistent. The principle behind,
because now you're adding frequency to the one side of it, knowing that you're going to get frequency on the other side.
So the idea would be that it's one way or the other. They either have the discretion to do it and it comes with transparency and accountability. I'm not saying you're saying they should, or it has to always be with voter approval. But it can't be both at the same time.
Right. And if you want to change that, let's change the whole funding model. Let's go all the way. Let's not, you don't want to not even go halfway, but partial way. If you're going to do that, you got to change the unicount formula. Maybe you then only can go to referendum for just capital after you do that, right? Like, there's other ways to do it. Like, for instance, like charter schools, there's a process you can go through to close a school, which then would take away from any sort of deferred maintenance, right? There's no process like that for the public school. So, like, why isn't there uniformity there if they're all public institutions? There's a lot of structural issues we have. That all starts with the funding formula, quite honestly. Go from there.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the funding formula, but question on referendum reform. Would you, I mean, if that were to come up as a topic, if people really want to, is there an appetite for saying we're going to do referendum reform? We're not going to do referendum in
yeah, I mean, I'm up for whatever that people want to discuss and debate. I mean, I'm going to do what my constituents want me to do at the end of the day. Even if I don't think it's necessarily what I'd like done. But I think people have a lot of strong opinions, and that's why I also have a lot of public meetings to get as much feedback as I can on that. But people are pretty clear right now on what they're looking for. I think the vast majority of people want my bill to eliminate the 10% on its own, where they have to go to referendum or deal with it in a different way. I think a lot of people would like the school districts to be able to split the rate between commercial and non-commercial.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. I think if they're able to do that, why can't the school districts when it comes to the taxing side? That's fair. So I think there's something to be there. I do think Tyler needs to be audited. I do think we need different type of auditing of the school districts, not this traditional audit that happens every couple years. We don't really know where the spending's going. Let's be real. And because that's what's opening a lot of people's eyes. They're like, we don't mind paying for it, but like, where's some of this stuff going? Nobody can seem to answer the question.
Yeah. Yeah. We're putting together, I mean, I would agree. I think there's, and I'm starting from the point of the perspective that it's not for a lack of willingness, but it's for a lack of maybe knowledge or training. So where we're trying to, first aid educators trying to lean in on is, let's provide training. Okay, so I'm developing this whole course on financial management, right? Some of the stuff are basic things like what are GAAP when you look at accounting, and what's the state financial system, and how is the unicap. Like, there's these basics, right, that you have to know. And then we can go to experts to sort of talk through what are the best ways of strategic investment for these dollars, or reporting on outcomes for these dollars, right? Not to say that it should be a business model, but just in general, there are experts around the nation that do this differently.
And I know this is an unpopular thing to say, but at the end of the day, like, schools are run like businesses. They're not businesses, but financially they are run like businesses. You have CFOs, you have people that are operating that way. Like, we have to look at it from that perspective. Children shouldn't be looked at that way, but the operation of the school should be.
Yeah, and I think one huge, I mean, they look at the human capital that it takes to run, an education system, the number of teachers that each district has. So they need to be able to better, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of interest. Board members are curious, at least the newly elected ones that we've been working with are expressing, like, what do you have for us? How can I become credentialed in this? I really want to know and understand. And I can imagine that it's hard if you don't have access to ongoing training to sort of keep up with the times and figure out, how does this work, or what questions could I ask, or what suggestions can I make at the board table to get more transparency and accountability.
Well, I think that's a very good point. I mean, when I became elected, you become the representative at midnight, like the very next day. Like, so you're just like shuttled into this experience. And if you don't have a strategic hat on how to think and how to, it really involves critical thinking. How do you then go about asking questions? And that goes back to your education and everything else that you away. But you do need resources to help you, and organizations that are there to help you. And for school districts, a lot of these folks, they don't have a background in education, and education funding is different. The formula is much different. So you do need more of a, to dive all in on how that works, and what questions to ask, and how to work with a district. I do think a better partnership. It gets so divisive sometimes. Like, to me, it should be about kids first, and then teachers is 1B, because without either of those, it doesn't work right. And then everything else, can kind of come next. But we need to make it mostly about the impact of the kids. They're our future, and what do we want our future workforce to look like? That's a question I ask a lot. I mean, for 30 years, we told kids not to go to college. Now, look, you can go and do a trade and make a ton of money. But hey, how about if we work entrepreneurship into that too? And you have to start your own business. You should go to college, but what should you major in? Like, do you want to live in Delaware? If you do, like, what are the jobs that are available? Or, how is AI changing those jobs? So me personally, we should always be looking at 5 to 10 years ahead of what jobs are going to be popular that we're educating people towards.
Yeah. And if that were to change, which brings us to the last question I wanted to ask you before we close out. And again, this was a great conversation. It is a complex issue, and just the opportunity to talk through it is helpful to me, helpful to the listeners, and I hope helpful to your constituents. If the jobs of the future change, and if the education system needs to be responsive to that, and if we're on the verge of something with AI and everything else, does K-12 start to look differently? And then if that's true, does the fund, how we fund it, or this question of a new funding formula in Delaware, how can that be leveraged as an opportunity to sort of position Delaware to sort of move to the front of the pack?
Look, I think of this whole moment in time as an opportunity. I think now we can focus on this funding formula that people have said they want to work on since I was in high school, maybe beforehand. It's like, no, let's actually do it, because we are now at an intersection where kids are learning differently. My 14-year-old will say all the time, like, yeah, you can give me a cheat sheet on a note card, or I can be in honors classes and memorize it or learn it. There's a difference. But at the end of the day, like, we're all going home to AI, Dad, the internet, and YouTube. Like, it's just different. They almost have the what do you call those? They're like the escape rooms. They have like that type of mentality. Like, how do you solve a problem Who do you
Yeah.
work with in the group that's from a different background than you, but
Yeah.
has different strengths than you, and you have different weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
than them? But how do you coalesce together as a team around
Right.
solving the problem? And those are like
Uh-huh.
the core things you have to, I think, teach kids,
Right.
because at the end of the day, hardly any of them know how to look up from their phone and have a
Right.
conversation anymore. The soft skills are broken. So let's double down on the soft skills and the math and science and all that. And because everything else is at their fingertips, they don't have to
Right.
memorize things anymore. They're not in a
Yeah.
world where that's going to do it. We have technology that'll always enhance that for them.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's right. And it is exciting. I think it's challenging, but it'll also require too that the way that teaching happens, the whole process, that'll change along with it. And one of the great things about Delaware is that they do have a lot of really, really talented and committed educators. I mean, the people who are in the classrooms across the state, they do care. They
Oh, they
do
do.
want something better.
You don't go into teaching if you don't have a passion for making an impact.
Right.
You just don't.
Yeah.
Like, why
Yeah.
else would you do it? But at the end of the day, like, it all starts like anything else, even in the health sector, right? Like, you have to be
Mm-hmm.
trained a specific way. You get credentialed, you get a license, then you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So if you go through the traditional education pathway, you're going through a traditional higher ed pathway. You're going to go
Right.
into student teaching. You're going to do that, but that might require some change too. I mean, to me, how do
Yeah.
you leverage AI across everything you're being taught in higher ed now?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
where does that intersect into the classroom? And what's the day-to-day experience in a classroom look like? I don't think sitting there is, we just passed a bill about integrating more play into learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. As a father of three boys, I can tell
Yeah.
you they have energy and they need to play a lot in order to
Yeah.
get that energy out.
And it is it's the application too of things. I mean, I think that's where
Yep.
it's definitely going. Mike, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Thanks for one being so available and accessible for us to have this conversation, to explore the reassessment topic in greater depth. I know there's a lot of questions. So for the listeners out there, if you have questions, we don't provide the official answers, but we're happy to gather the questions and figure out how to produce some answers and get them sent back out. I think we do want to have a broader conversation that's inclusive so we can get to things that make sense and those bigger solutions, right? Let's reform the whole thing. Let's make sure the right money is going to the right place to have the right quality of education so that everyone benefits.
Yeah, maybe Democrats and Republicans should just have their own escape room. They can't get out until they solve the funding formula and do something new now. That's what I would say.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
There you go.
Okay. Mike, thank you again. And for all of our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leading Together podcast. We look forward to seeing you again soon.